calling this one Adventure 251. When God opens a door you weren't even expecting. After I graduated from grad school and I moved back to Washington, graduated with my master's in social work and was trying to find a clinical job. And there are lots of jobs out there, but even with a master's degree, entry-level jobs just don't pay a lot. And I was getting really frustrated and disheartened at the process, but nothing was coming together. And God, in the way only God does, knew what I needed in that season, knew where he was taking me on the adventure that is my life, knew what I would need to learn in order to be the woman that he wanted me to be, in order to walk in the things that he was calling me into. And so though this introverted girl, as we've talked about, would never have imagined, picked to live with somebody again. I had roommates in college. I was finally on my own, ready to adult. And I did not want to live with somebody. I wanted my home to be my space. But God knew better. God knew what I would need. And so he divinely brought this other single woman from our church into my life. Shout out Amy. We happened to run into each other at a grocery store, and I didn't even know her. I think I had heard about her, maybe, but I knew she was looking for somewhere to live, and I shared that I was looking for somewhere to live. And no joke, a week after that conversation, we were signing a lease to rent a house together. And the way that all even came together is just another one of those God things. We met up at the house. Our parents came to see it with us, and it just clicked. And the next thing I know, we're standing in the front yard praying about it. And what's amazing is from that first interaction with her, I began to learn what it was like to fully integrate your faith into your life. Faith had been this thing in kind of this separate sphere where I knew God and I believed and I went to church and I prayed and I had a relationship with God, but it didn't pour out of me in an authentic and genuine way because I kept it in its own little space. To see somebody who is just authentically and boldly living out their faith was incredibly inspiring to me. I needed to have a role model of how to live life completely abandoned to what God is doing. And the year and a half that she and I lived together, the more I grew in my faith. We would have conversations late into the night, wrestling and challenging each other, and really that relationship was the epitome of iron sharpening iron. And there would be times where I thought she should be doing something with a particular decision, and her response to me was always, well, God will come through. That was not an excuse to not do anything. She just completely trusted God, 100%. If God said go, she would go. If God said stay, she stayed. It didn't matter what other people in her life said, even people that she loved and trusted and spoke into her life. And above all, she knew who God was. She had an unshakable foundation in the Lord. As somebody who was starting out understanding what living life with God, what truly living life with God meant, to have it integrated into every aspect of what I do, that lens, how I view the world, how I view every decision, how I view every relationship, to watch somebody who just knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that God is who he says he is. She intentionally poured into her relationship with God so that she could know his voice better. This wasn't, well, I just believe because that's what people tell me, or I just believe because I grew up in church. She invested time in that relationship, and she saw the fruits of that. And watching her walk that out, where sometimes I would have thoughts of like, shouldn't you be doing something else? There was one time where she was looking, like feeling like God was calling her to a different job. And in my mind, as somebody who switched jobs a lot of times, like, you need to look, you need to act, you need to make a plan, you need to do things. And she wasn't. Not that she was just sitting by and waiting for God to drop something in her lap, because that wasn't it at all. Sometimes God does that, but she was just waiting on God. God hadn't told her to move. God hadn't told her to start making an action plan. And I am an action plan kind of person. I am always making lists and planning the next thing. And it's calming to me to be in control. I'm a doer in that way. It's one of the conversations that she and I would often have of the difference between being a doer and a beer. She is a beer, where she can just be with God. It was so encouraging, life-giving, transforming to watch somebody boldly live out their faith and their trust in God. It has allowed me to have a deeper relationship with God myself, to understand what walking life with God actually means. And it means to surrender my will and my control to God, to listen, to not always speak. A real hard time with that. It means to trust, even when the path does not seem clear. I have a real easy time trusting God when I know where I am and I know where I'm going. And I'm just trusting that the path will be what the path is. I don't necessarily need to know all the steps in between, but as long as I know where I am and where I'm going, I'm good. But that's not necessarily true and authentic trust and faith. God doesn't always tell you where you're going. He might just say you're going. He might just be asking you to take one step. Or he might be asking you to take no steps. And as somebody who's a doer and a planner and a list maker and a checker off from the list maker, whatever that is, I want to do. If there are 50 steps between here and there, I will do them, God. But give me a step. And what I have learned from her is the importance of being still, and really how to cultivate your ear to hear God. Because when we're so busy going from here to there and doing all the things, sometimes we miss the whisper of God. Sometimes we get so caught up and so busy doing all the right things, doing all the Christian things, that we completely miss what God is actually asking us to do, or who he's actually asking us to be. Because this life is not all about doing, it's about being a disciple of God.